Now, it was good to be able to drill down through the quarters and months and see seasonality. But the problem is, I'm still wading through an awful lot of figures. Let's have a look at this in a more graphical visualization. So first of all, I'm going to duplicate this page. So I'm going to right and click on page 2. In fact, I'm going to rename it first. I'm going to call that matrix. And now I'm going to duplicate the page, right and clicking on it, duplicate page. And then I'm going to rename this as bar chart. Now I'm going to select the visualization. None of it is selected. There's these dotted lines around it, but that's just around the page rather than the visualization. So I'm going to click on the visualization so we can see these little markers. And I'm going to change the visualization and see what we get. So the first is a stacked bar chart. So what this shows are Greater Manchester, Merseyside, all of the regions, the total sales volume going across, and each bar is divided up into each individual year. Okay, that hasn't happened. What's going on? Well, let's have a look at the axis. The axis is date and region name. Previously, we had date on one axis, columns on another, whereas now they've all been grouped together on one particular axis. But we can't see the date. We can only see the region name. Well, it is a bit odd, but having all of these on the same axis allows us to drill up and down. So if I drilled right to the top, you would see the date, year, and then the quarters going down, and then the months, and then the day, and then the region name. So it could be useful, basically set up once, used many times for different types of data. But that's not what I personally want. I want to see all of the region names and, let's say, different colours for the date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the date into the legend field. And now you can see we've got this little legend at the top, which has a different colour for each year. Now for me, this is a bit too much. I would swap these two around. I will have date in the axis field and region name there. But again, for me, not quite right. If I've got so many different values, I generally don't have them running from top to bottom. I have them running from left to right, like this. So here we can see individual regions. We can see their sales, and we can see the totality of the sales for each individual year. Now, it could be that I would want to drill down on this, so I'm just going to remove date, add date back in, and now we've got the drill down functionality, so I can drill down instead of individual years, I can drill down into quarters. So here you can see the seasonality again, months, and if there was day data, that would be there as well. Alternatively, I could pick a particular year. Now I can't use the drill down when I've got the format selected, so when I've got this blue surround, so I'll just click out of the visualization, click in it again, and I can select the drill down and select a particular year and go down to year, quarter, month, and day if I so wish. Now it could be that you don't want them on top of each other, you want them next to each other. Well, instead of using a stacked column chart, you can use a clustered column chart, but this is where it gets a bit messy because I've got too much data. So we'll have a look at a clustered column and bar chart in a later video. So the key is you mustn't overwhelm with data. This provides a story. How many sales did we have per year, and how is it broken down into each of the particular regions? Now, maybe you don't like the colours. They are the default colours. Well, let's see if we can change them. We'll go into Format, and we'll go into Data Colours. And so you can see, you can select individual colours for each of the regions. So it could be I want to go onto this sort of bluish type colours. So I will have them of perhaps darker colours. As we go up, it may be that you want the darker colours right at the bottom. So now it looks a lot more coherent, a lot more like the previous one just looked like lots of different colours all together. But you can actually change individual colours. If I click on Revert to Default, you can change the individual colours, but you can also change the defaults. And that is done by switching themes. If you go into Home, Theme, Switch Theme, or in later versions go to the View menu, we can see that there are a few themes we can have a look at. So for instance, City Park, Classroom, Colorblind Safe, or High Contrast. So Microsoft really tailors for people with certain disabilities. Not sufficient number of theme? Well, you can go to the theme gallery, and that will take you to the internet, and you can choose from a wide variety of different themes. Now, there is something else called import theme, and actually that is quite complicated. It uses a file called a JSON, and it uses hexadecimal codes for colors, and basically it's for much more advanced users. So for right now, I would not use that. I would instead get a theme that is close to what you want, and then adjust the individual colors using the more graphical version than using hexadecimal colors that you'd have to if you were importing a theme. So you can get your charts looking exactly as you would wish with a certain amount of style. And then finally for this video, you can also in more recent versions change the transparency, so how much you can see through the bar, if any. You can also add a border, and you can see that the border could match the column border, or you could have an independent border. You could also change the transparency and the width of the border. And then if we change the series back to all, we've also got a layout section where we can reverse the order of the colours. So we could have darkest on the bottom and lightest on the top. We could also change which bars are on the top. We can sort by value. So we can see here that the biggest bars are on the top, the smallest bars are on the bottom. And we can also change the space between categories, so that thins down the bar. And we can also change the space between the series, which reduces the height of the bar. And there's also an option for series explosion, So if you use that in conjunction with the space between the series, first of all, the numbers on the y-axis disappear, and secondly, instead of there being a gap between the bars by the bars being reduced, the gap is made by moving the bars further apart, but that means you can no longer see reliably the totality of the bars because we've now got this additional space. So use this with some care. So in this video, we've had a look at bar and column chart types, and we've also had a look at how we can change the color, both for individual columns and in just a quick look at all of the formatting that you can do. So you can change the x-axis, so you can have either a continuous or a categorical type, so you can see the difference. What this means is categories. Each year becomes a unique category as opposed to something on a scale. So here it's treating it something on a scale from 1995 through to 2015. Here it's treating it like a category, just like red, green, blue, or car, vehicle, lorry. Each of those are categories. If it was continuous, then you get to set the start and end values. And if you have got logarithmic data, so data that goes 1, 10, 100, 1,000, which really multiplies rather than just in tens, rather than just adds like ours does in ones, then you can choose logarithmic, but if you don't have that data, just keep to linear. You can also have the years going in the other order by inverting the range. We've got similar things for the y-axis. You'll see that linear is the only one that the computer thinks makes any sense, but you can change the start and the end values as well. And you can have a position of where the axis is. So here it is on the right hand side, here it is on the left. Now scrolling down, you can change other things like the display unit, probably quite useful. You can see it's automatically displayed in thousands. You may say, no, I want it to display as the full figure, or I want it to display in millions. So you can have an axis title. So here we have sales volume on and off. And you can say show the title only, or show the unit only. Here you can see the word thousands, or show both. You can edit the axis title if you've got one. You can edit the size, add grid lines or remove grid lines. The grid lines are these little lines going across, and how thick the grid lines are on a scale of 1 to 4, and whether they are solid, dotted, or dashed. Looking at some of the other things, so we've got a legend. So whether we see the legend, that's this up here, and where it is positioned. So you can have it in quite a few places. Whether you've got the title for the legend, in this case region name, or whether that's not needed, and of course you can adjust the title. We've had a look at adjusting the data colors previously. You can have data labels. Now, data labels allow you to see instantly what that particular value is. So it gets written, in this case, inside the data label, right in the middle, but you could have it right at the top, or center middle, or center bottom. So it depends where you want it. Now, you may notice some of the labels aren't showing. So the reason for this is because it thinks, okay, if I show too much, that's going to perhaps annoy the end user. So you could change the label density so that it only shows certain labels, or change it to 100% so it shows all. So if you're struggling and going, why aren't all of them being shown? Have a look at the label density. There's also a show background. So if you want the label to have its own background, like this, you can also do that as well. Just going down, we've also got the plot area. So here we can add an image to the background if you so wish and change the transparency of the background. So if you had, I don't know, a sunset or your corporate logo, that could be in the background, washed as much as you wish. Now, in addition to all of those, which I have just gone through, there are also a lot of those particular categories that we've had a look at previously, and I won't be pointing them out each time. So there will be a border, there will be tooltips you can add, there will be titles, there will be general where you can actually fine tune it. So this is a look at all of the formatting that you can do for stacked column charts and stacked bar charts. Now, just as a reminder, if you're using the on-object interaction, then you can double click on a visualization to get into the formatting mode. And when you do that, you can adjust things such as the title just by double clicking on things. You can also select certain items, again, just by clicking on them, like for instance, the axes or the axes titles. And you can also right and click to get quick access to fill and border colors, and you can also use the drop down to select a particular type of item and be taken to that in the formatting pane. So you can use this as a quick way of getting to a particular category within the formatting pane. Now in this video I want to have a look at the interactivity between two different visualizations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this visualization and go back to our original visualization, the table. I'm just going to get rid of this second one, which we've now included in the matrix, and paste it, resize. And you could also do lots of other things as you wished as well. Now, we have got here one table visualization and one bar chart visualization. Now, if I click on Greater Manchester in the table, notice what happens in the bar visualization. And it's actually a bit difficult to see what does indeed happen, but you can see something definitely has. If I deselect. Now the reason it's a bit difficult is because all of these colours are sort of greyed out anyway. So if I click on the formatting into data colours and just reset them, revert to default, you'll see that we've got vibrant colours to begin with. And then when I select Greater Manchester, all of the other colours get washed out apart from Greater Manchester, going to Merseyside, and you can see they get highlighted. Now we can edit what happens between visualizations. If I click on one of the visualizations, the one that I'm going to be selecting the various components, and I go to Visual Tools format, edit interactions. So you see what it says, change how visualizations interact when data points are selected. So I'll click on this edit interactions. And what happens is it gives me an extra 3 icons. And you'll see they expand as soon as I get onto them, but it's really these 3 icons I want to talk about. We've got highlight. Highlight in this case is the default. So if I click on a particular region name, we're looking at that region. But the other main one I want to talk about is filter. If I click on this, nothing appears to happen. But now I'm going to click on South Yorkshire, and the bar changes, the bar chart, so that it is solely about South Yorkshire. Click on Merseyside and it's solely about Merseyside. Now the third interaction is none. So that means I can click on any of these and it doesn't actually affect this lower visualization. So you can select what happens when a particular visualization gets clicked on, what actually happens. Now this is very useful when you have additional visualizations on a particular page, more than one. So I'm going to insert a new table visualization. So I'll just click on table, there it is, and I'm going to add in the date, just the year, and I'm going to have a total of the sales volume. So let's just format it so that it's a lot bigger. So what I can do now is click on South Yorkshire, and that 3,795,000 total gets reduced to 431. Click on Merseyside and that gets reduced as well. So what happens if I've got South Yorkshire and I click on 2000? So you'll see that only one selection happens at once. So I can't click on Tyne and Wear and 2002. As soon as I click on something else, the other one gets deselected. Well, I can if I use the Control key, but more about that later. Now, another thing to bear in mind is that if you've got visualizations which are very close together, then you might not see the highlight and filter icons. To remedy this, let's just move this table up, and you can see that they are hiding behind this visualization. So if you're doing this edit interactions, then you might just temporarily want to have a bit of vertical space between the visualizations, just to make sure that you can see all these icons okay. So as I've still got these edit interactions, I can say, okay, with this, I want you to do a filter. So here we have a filter. So now if I select 2003, it focuses solely on 2003. But you can also see that we could also interact with other tables. So here we are filtering this second table, or this first table, through the second table. So when I click on a particular year, it just shows what's in that year. So how you can use this combination of highlighting formatting is really only defined by your ambition for this particular page. What do you want it to do when you click on a particular number? Do you want it to filter, or do you want it to highlight? So I'll change this one back to a highlight, and so you can see it highlights year 2000. So this could be quite a useful demonstration tool. So you could say, well, let's just focus on 2006. Here was the results. Now let's add 2007. I'm going to hold down Control or Shift and select 2007 and 2009. And so you can select more than one thing from a particular visualization. Now, if you do want to have, say, South Yorkshire in 2006, 7 and 9, then you can do that using the Control or Shift like this. So here I've got South Yorkshire for 2006, 7 and 9 all highlighted. Now I've added West Midlands to the mix, and I'm going to deselect West Midlands. All of that through using the Control key. So this makes it quite a powerful tool to be able to look at individual items or more than one item at once and just focus down on this. Now you may have noticed in other applications, I could say click on the first one and then hold down Shift and click on the last to get a range. That is not a possibility here. You've got to use the Control or Shift to select additional items individually. So this Edit Interactions, once you've finished, deselect it. The interactions will still happen, but you'll no longer have those little icons that enable you to change what they do from highlight to filter or to none. So interactions are very useful on one particular page. They allow you to focus on a particular topic, and you can narrow it down by using additional tables to focus the end user's attention. And just in case you're thinking, can we do it the other way? Yes, if I click on a particular area of the graph, we can change the tables so that it's focusing on time and wear for the year 2004, for example, and then holding down Control, I can add additional years or additional other areas as well. So all of that can be tailored with the Edit Interactions. We've had a look at stacked bar and column charts. And the essence of these is that the individual elements get put on top of each other. So this item, which is 17,000, gets put on top of another one, which is 33,000, and together they get to the 50,000 line. But suppose you wanted each to be on an individual space. Well, you can do that with the clustered column charts. So if I just select this particular item and I convert it to a clustered column chart, obviously you can also insert one as well if you so wish. Here you can see the results, and you can see there's an awful lot of information. So I don't recommend using clustered column charts where there is this much information. If, however, I was to drill down a bit so that instead of looking at all of the data, we would just be going down to the next level. Here we have the quarters and even the months. That is a fairly reasonable amount of data that can be shown. And here we can see, for instance, the seasonality of Greater Manchester, and see whether there is a similar seasonality of Tyne and Wear. Whereas previously, if I just click on do a few times, it was difficult to see the seasonality of Tyne and Wear because the places were, the individual bars were in a different place each time. Whereas if I redo that, you can now see they are individual elements. So we can see there is still the same seasonality for Tyne and Wear, just not as much of the summer as there is in Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester goes from 200 to 235 to 255, whereas Tyne and Wear, it goes up from 76 to 97,000, but then sort of stabilizes 102,000. So where you have a limited number of items, then this can be good. It requires a even more limited number of items if it was a bar chart the other way, but I suppose it depends on how much space you've got. If you had it in an individual page and as one of many visualizations, then it could be that you have more height than width, in which case having it the other way around could work quite nicely. Now, sometimes you really don't care about how big the individual items are. It's what is the percentage of the totality. So here we can see everything is rising, maybe. But is Greater Manchester rising at a greater rate than West Yorkshire or the West Midlands? Well, we can have a look at that using 100% stacked bar charts. What this does is this stretches the totality so that it reaches the very top. So here in 2003, we don't have that much to stretch. But going back to 1995, we need to nearly double the height to get it all the way to the top. So if I change this to 100% stacked column chart, now you can see all of them being compared in the same ratio. So here we're looking less at the actual sales volume, but looking more at the percentage. So looking at this, we can see that it's roughly the same throughout, but there are variances. For instance, West Yorkshire goes down to 20%, whereas previously it's been in the 21%, even getting to 22%. So in 2011, it is the most affected, perhaps, of the entire 6 regions that we've got by the falling house prices and falling house sales particularly. So this is probably the least used of the bar charts. It's there when you want to do comparisons between similar items, but you're caring less about the absolute values, which you can see in the stacked column charts, and you just want to see the ratio. So here I can't see the individual sales. I can't see that sales went up between 1995 and 2003, whereas here I can see this quite easily. So we have got now 3 different types of bar charts and column charts. We have got the stacked variety, where they're on top of each other. We've got the clustered variety. So if I go down to a lower level, you can see how that can be used more effectively maybe. And we have got the 100% stacked column charts as well. So here we can see if there's any major variances in seasonality. Looking at the formatting, you'll see that there are no new categories of formatting to learn in all of these three. So once you've mastered one, you'll be able to find where all of the formatting is in all of the others. We're going to have a look at all of the line and area charts. So I'm just going to duplicate this. So rename this page, line or area, and go back up to the top. So line and area charts follow very similarly to what we've just seen in the bar charts. So first of all, our standard line chart. So this is each of the individual areas not stacked on top of each other. So you can see Tyne and Wear at 24,000. What's next? South Yorkshire at 27,000 isn't being stacked on top of each other. The idea of the line chart is that it enables you very simply to see where each of these values goes, including if they interact with each other, if they overlap. Now, this is probably when it's better not to have similar colours. So if I switch it to the default, which it already was, but then go into data colours and reset to default. So here we can see, for instance, this line goes interweaving, and similarly here this line goes below the line. So it allows you to have these individual items on top of each other if you so wish. I mean, you could always, of course, just have one overall item. You don't actually have to have a subdivision. So here we just have the total number of sales. But if you are having many different lines, then you can see the interweaving that comes into play. Now, the next visualization is an area chart, and it's moderately successful. And you can see again the interweaving that happens, and it does allow for you to be able to see the lines as well. Now, the only problem with this is that each colour is not necessarily associated with a particular region. For example, right here, this dark colour is associated with the second line of South Yorkshire. But now, this dark colour of the area, that is to say, is associated with the second lineup, which is Merseyside. And similarly, this lightest grey is associated with the line, second from the top, West Yorkshire. But now it is associated with the West Midlands. But again, it's the second from the top, so it's the order. So it's moderately successful. It's better than the Excel version in that you can actually see the lines even if they are behind a line. Now, you can also have stacked lines as well, stacked areas. So here we can see the 20, well, if we go to the left hand side, the 33 on top of the 17 again is right next to the 50 point of the axis. So that's useful if you want to see the grand total as well as the individual build-ups. In terms of the formatting, there's just one new section to have a look at, and that is the shapes or lines section. So we've got the stroke width, how thick you want the lines. You've got the line style, so whether you want solid or dashed or dotted. But really, it's this stepped one that's perhaps the most interesting. It allows you to radically change what it looks like. And this is the true for line charts, as well as for area charts. It looks a bit odd to me, but as it could be useful if you've got one of these perhaps being one particular type and others being another. So for instance, maybe you have these line charts and you wanted to really show Merseyside as a different type of line. So I'm going to customize this series and I'm going to say that Merseyside is going to be stepped and everything else is going to be normal. And this really draws attention to Merseyside. Not often used, I think, but it's nice to know that it is there. So if you want something a bit more striking, you can have this stepped function. And you can customize the series so that just one particular item gets this stepped, or perhaps a thicker stroke width as you wish. All the others are basically the same as what we've previously seen. So we've seen formatting on the x-axis and the y-axis. We've seen formatting of individual data colors and data labels. It's really this shapes which is unique to the line and the area charts. Just for completeness, we've also got markers. So these allow you to have little dots or other types of shapes. And you can also adjust the marker size and the marker color. Again, you can customize the series. And we've also got a zoom slider. So this allows us to adjust the axis without having to go into the formatting. So if you wanted to zoom on a particular area, you can do that with the zoom slider. So I think most of the unique new functionality for these particular visualizations is in the lines section. It used to be called shapes, now called lines. And you can adjust the line style, the stroke width and whether it is stepped, and also the individual colors. And just as a reminder, if you're using on-object interaction, you can double-click the visualization to get into format mode, and then right and click to adjust things like the fill border for any of the individual elements. You can also add additional elements by clicking on this painter with a plus icon. So this is another quick way of adding elements. So I can quickly add a zoom slider and then format it in the format page. Suppose you had more than one measure that you were looking at. So I'm going to start a new page and I'm going to drag or click on the line and stacked column chart on this visualization. And what I want to do, so my question is, per year, what is the difference in the 12-month change of flats, also known as apartments, compared to semi-detached buildings? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the date onto the shared axis. So this is the axis at the bottom. And we have got a column series. So just like the previous series, the legend that we got here, I could drag on region name if I so wished. But I'm just going to leave that blank for the moment. And then it says, well, what are your values? And it gives you two separate values, column values and line values. So what do you want to be represented by column and what do you want to be represented for line? So I want the flat, that's the apartment, 12-month % change. Here I represent it as a column. And I'm going to change this so this is the average. Now, looking at some of these figures, we go all the way up to 27%. It's possible that house prices went up by 27%, but it'd be nice to actually see if it did. So I'm going to right and click on it and go to See Records, which in more recent versions is called Show Data Point as a Table. And you can see, yes, it looks like on average house prices did go up by 27%, so this is realistic. And you'll also notice a few other things that we've talked about in previous levels, in previous videos as well. You've also got include and exclude. So if for some reason you didn't want to see 2003, 2004, then you can exclude it and it gets removed. But I'm just going to undo that. Now I want to compare and contrast that with the semi-detached 12% 12 months percentage change. So I'll drag that into the line values. So here we can see how these two correlate. And you can see we go all the way up to 30% almost in 2004. Just make sure that is the average. There we go, that's better. That wasn't making much sense. Notice what happened, it was the sum, and it was therefore plotting it because it was such a different figure. It was plotting it on a second axis. So make sure when you drag things in, it is giving you something that's the summation that you actually want. So here, 2010, we actually have some positive figures, plus 3% for some of these detached houses, but our flats or apartments are still in negative territory. They're going down by minus 0.75% a year on average. Now, we can make this more complicated by putting in the region name. So if I put region name into the column series, then you can see them being built up on top because this is a stacked column chart, or on the side because this is a clustered column chart. But notice it only does this for the columns. The lines remain just as the single line. So this is a column series, column values and line values. Personally, I wouldn't recommend doing this too much. It's starting to get a bit cluttered, but it is informative. It's telling you at its peak, for instance, Merseyside had, oh my goodness, about 35% change in the flats compared to the overall national change of semi-detached of 27%. So what you can do, of course, is have the same comparator for column values and line values. So if I drag in again the average of the flat 12 months percentage, here we can see the overall average, and here we can see the individual items, the individual regions. So we can see who is above and who is below. In this case, West Midlands not joining in with the house price inflation at this stage. but then it gets a bit cushioned later on maybe. As always with these things, make sure that you don't overdo it. Make sure that you're communicating a message to the end user, preferably not too complicated a message. So this is how you use line and stacked column charts and line and clustered column charts when you've got two separate measures that you are going to compare and contrast, or if you're dividing one measure up into various series. So let's have a look at the additional formatting options we've got there, and we're going to start with the lines section, which used to be the shape section, and at the bottom we have got this shade area. So that turns it from a line and clustered column chart to an area and clustered column chart. Now you can see there aren't any options in there. So where are the colors? Well, you have to go into colors to be able to change that, if you so wish. So looking at the other options, so again, we've got the zoom slider that we had before, and you can add labels and tooltips and also secondary y-axis if you so wish. You do have the option of a y-axis, a secondary y-axis. So if you use it, then it will be used for the line as opposed to the bars. Now do bear in mind, it might not match up. So you can see here the 0 on the secondary axis isn't matching up with the 0 on the primary axis. So do be careful what you do. You can align the zeros if you so wish, but now the tops don't align. So it is fraught with some difficulty in explaining exactly what all these different axes are if you're not careful. Within columns, we only have the one thing, which is changing the colors. We have the markers on and off. Now we have data labels. So you can see it gets really confused if you use it with the clustered column chart, probably better on the stacked column charts. Then we've got series labels. So if I turn this on, you can see that we've got a label for the line. Well, what good is that? Well, if I go back into the add data to your visuals, I can add more than one line value. So if I was to add, say, the detached 12-month percentage change, then you can see that we have both of those being shown with a label at the end. Now, it does get a bit more complicated, especially if you're using the area option that we had, the shade area. So if you're doing this, then my suggestion is have the bars as simple as possible and don't use the shade area. It does really get confusing after a little while. So these are the additional things that you can do if you are using a line and column chart. And as I say, the biggest new thing is in lines, and it's a shade area, and you can change the color by going to the colors immediately above the shade area option. Finally, if you note some problems, like for instance the bars not matching up with the lines, then you might need to turn the secondary axis off, and you might need to turn the zoom slider off to rectify these problems. So this is how you can use line and stacked column charts and line and clustered column charts.